The reason why this is strategically important is because we have a huge chip dependency on Taiwan, which is under threat from China. So if chips are the new oil, Taiwan is the new Middle East or the new Persian Gulf, and it is a very dangerous situation for us to be completely dependent on Taiwan. Well, not completely, but like for over half our chips. So onshoring advanced chip manufacturing makes sense, but I think this is an example of how you start with a legitimate objective in Washington, and very rapidly it turns into corporate welfare and graft by politicians. I mean,
yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, I mean, just because we need to onshore manufacturing doesn't mean that you give Intel and NVIDIA giant handouts. And then you got Paul Pelosi making millions trading NVIDIA options.
Yeah, and this is ridiculous. Something that is
What would you have done, Sachs, to support onshoring of semiconductor manufacturing? Who would you give the money to, and how would it be kind of dulled out, and what would the terms of it be?
I don't know that you just give these companies money. I mean, I think maybe what you do is you give them tax breaks or various kinds of breaks, but I don't like
capital.
the idea.
They need capital to support that investment because, if you look at the kind of ROIC on these companies, I haven't looked, but I'm guessing they're in the high teens or something, mid to high teens. And they're not going to be able to invest in some newfangled, fab project that may or may not actually have customers at the end of the day. Their board would never approve that on an independent basis. So they need capital.
ROIC, Freeberg.
Return on invested capital. So if you're a big industrial business, one of the key metrics that your shareholders look at is the ultimate kind of profits that are generated from a big investment you might make. And so, you kind of look at that over time. You look at the invested money over time and the cash returned over time. And you come up with this metric. And so it's a key metric for particularly capital-intensive businesses. And so a business like Intel or NVIDIA, I would imagine, is going to have a pretty tough time selling their board on some speculative onshoring fab project. There really does need to be capital and acceleration of capital.
Freeberg, who feeds you this bullshit propaganda? Intel, in 2020, approved a share purchase plan where these guys had a hold of $110 billion and have spent all of it except for $7.2 billion. They have $6 billion left on the balance sheet.
I get it, but they're not going to put that money at risk, right? Like Chamath, imagine you're on the board of Intel, and they're like, "Hey,
the government." Okay, so basically, hold on.
But
I make a ton of money.
This is where it all comes from, right? Yeah.
I make a ton of money. I have no better ideas of how to do it, including theoretically building a chip factory. So I'm going to go to the government for a handout. Meanwhile, I'm going to take all the money that I had, which I could have used to fund this thing, and I'm going to give it away to people who I don't know what they're going to do with it.
I would reframe it. I would say that the government wants to see our industry onshore semiconductor manufacturing. And they are going to the companies, not the companies going to the government. They're saying, we want you to onshore semiconductor manufacturing. Do that for us now. Like in World War II, we went to the automobile manufacturers and the government said, we want you to make airplanes. Here's a bunch of money, make airplanes. And so the question then is, who does that money go to? Who else would you give that money to besides the two best chip makers in the world?
David's right. If you just give us a CapEx subsidy, that's a one-time effect that helps you in a moment. It doesn't help your business. Any reasonable investor who can actually use a simple calculator sees through that nonsense. So what David's right is if you had given them sustained tax breaks for being able to build a business line that then supplies things for the duration, tens of years, you're absolutely right. Investors would laud it. It would make a ton of sense. They would be over-earning over a long enough period of time where people would have to bake that into their cash flow estimates, where when you discounted it back, it would make the enterprise of Intel and NVIDIA worth more, and then people would then want to own that stock more. Giving a CapEx subsidy is a meaningless way in which you basically hand out good money to organizations who have otherwise misallocated the money that they've already had.
Yeah, there's a much simpler solution to Sachs's point of like, how do you do this? And giving free money is not the way to do it. The best way to do it is to give an incredibly low interest rate loan, like a 30, 40, 50-year loan that maybe has some warrants in it, just like a Silicon Valley Bank or a Comerica might give in a venture debt loan, where the government actually could make money from this, and then you incent them with something that is just too good not to take. A 50-year loan of $5 billion to build factories. You have to use it for that. So it's use it or lose it. And then you slowly pay the government back. And then maybe we get some warrants in Intel or whoever we give the money to. This is something that Obama did with Solyndra, which didn't work out, but he also did it with Tesla, and Tesla paid all that money back early. So these loans that the Department of Energy did really did, and you got to give Barack Obama a lot of credit for this, it really did help drive, even though it wasn't perfect.
So by the way,
it did drive a lot of EV adoption. It did really help Tesla become the company it is today.
Sorry, let me just respond because I don't know how much we've gone through the details of the bill, but there are several components to this bill, including and I just want to highlight: if I'm on the board of Intel, I'm not going to make a $10 billion fab investment because there may or may not be profits down the road to justify that size of an investment. So if the government comes along and says we will cover X percent of that investment, I can take on more risk. And I am more willing to make that investment. And theoretically, I can afford to pay people a higher wage or a higher salary because I now have more capital freed up to support to do that. And so there is an effect that arises by having the government come in, put some money into these projects, accelerate their outcomes, and it gives the business more freedom.
But should it be, Freeberg, free money or in the form of a loan? So what should the financial device be, I think, is the question that you asked Sachs, if I'm interpreting correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the loan, because the loan doesn't resolve the fact that they're having to put up money, right? And so they're not necessarily going to make this onshoring investment. The rational capitalist decision is to offshore manufacturing for Intel. Yes. It is irrational for them from a business perspective, from a board perspective, from a fiduciary perspective, to onshore manufacturing. Correct. So the reason they're going to do it is not because they're getting a loan where the interest rate is low. That doesn't really solve the problem. It's the government saying, we're going to put a $10 billion facility. We want you to build it and manage it for us. And that's effectively what's happening. And now by building this $10 billion facility, we've created security for the rest of the U.S. industry. It's worth it to the government to put that money up. It creates security for our economy.
No, it won't.
Why wouldn't it create security? If we have more onshoring of chips,
and by the way,
that creates more security.
Sorry, I'll say one more thing. There's also an investment tax credit built into this bill, Sachs, which does provide over time a bunch of incentives to continue to support and drive the onshoring work that's proposed in the bill.
If you want the United States...
Point of personal privilege, can I request that Chamath add just one button to his shirt?
Yeah.
But